If I am remembered as a leader, or even as an All Black that just had a real heart for the people, I think then I've succeeded as an All Black. I see that really personified and lived out with this new group of All Blacks. The humility, the respect, the love for each other, the love for the people around them. And I just think, just coming back to the success of the All Blacks, I just think that's been the fundamental point of difference. That's seen us being so, the most successful sporting organisation in the world.
He is one of the greatest rugby players of all time, but his influence, mana and respect is just as immense off the field. A true icon of the game. This is his story. Sir Michael Jones, Indigenous 100. E te rangatira, te nākoe. Thank you very much for coming on Indigenous 100. It's a privilege to have you on the program. And I will try and control myself as one of your greatest fans, okay?
Because thank you.
Because I think, look, I'll be honest, I think my 10-year-old self would not believe that I would be in a position to be talking to you, right? So, and I'll try and control that, and we'll talk about rugby, absolutely. But you have done so much for your community.
I was sitting here thinking, were you actually born when I was playing? I mean, you still look about 20.
Not at all.
25.
Not at all. Well, and let's start there, if that's okay. And then the rest of the audience can, join in with the rest of us when we talk about the rest of your life. But because rugby was such a big part of your life, and for many people, you became the face of not just Pacific Island rugby represented through the All Blacks, but for many of us, you were our hero. And for many of us, the stand that you took, not playing on a Sunday, that was deeply a part of who you were and your identity, was vitally important for all of us for a number of reasons. And I wondered if you ever knew or felt or realised that there were so many of us who felt that you represented us in that way when you were playing.
Wow, I suppose what I do recall was the fact that I had a dream as a young sort of Kiwi Samoan shy Polynesian boy growing up in West Auckland, and I had a hero in my eyes was obviously the Sir B.G. Williams, and so I sort of had my own sort of person that I aspired to be like, and for us growing up in the 70s as young Pacific Islanders, whether we were living in Auckland or Porirua or Linwood, wherever, I saw the brown faces out there were few and far between, so we didn't have many sort of role models that we could look up to and think, wow, we want to be like, that person. But we did have Sir BG, and he was obviously, doing great things in the black jersey as a young sort of 18, 19-year-old. He was also an aspiring lawyer, so growing up with a mother that was big on education, who was raising us as a young widow. My own father passed away when I was 4 years old, so we had this great village raising me. I'm a byproduct of this great village, but I did have this role model, and so for me to sort of aspire to be like him, and in a way sort of walk in his own shoes eventually, when I was selected in '87, and my dream came true, I realized that that sort of legacy was something that I needed to nurture, and I suppose, as you said, Julian, become the face of, or become an important role model for a generation of young, not just Pacific young men and women, I suppose, but Polynesian, Māori and Pacific, and every Kiwi. So I did realise, and I suppose when I first started to realise was, I used to have a bit of a mullet, and I used to then see young kids who were having a bit of a mullet.
That's right.
I hope you didn't have a mullet, right?
I couldn't pull it off.
Mullets were in back then, so I suppose that's when I realised, hey, leadership is influence, and I'm having some influence here. You know, they were buying the boots that I had, the old laser boots. You might have had some of those, bro, and I had to put my signature on it. And I think it was only then that I realized, wow, kids are mimicking me. Kids, I suppose, in the same way that I had that dream to be and an aspiration to be like BG, and I tried to run like him and sidestep. You know, that's the same influence that I realized that that I had to, I suppose, steward. And I realized pretty early I needed to steward that leadership gift, that influence, very carefully and very seriously from an early age.
I can tell you in the Māori community, because Brian Williams wasn't Williams, we as Ngāpuhi claimed him because, you know, Williams family.
Yeah.
And you were a Jones, and there's a big Jones family, as you know, in the north,
sure
so we tried to claim
somewhere.
you as well.
The whakapapa goes back, I'm sure.
That's right, mate. We're all connected. Hawaii Nui. But,
Yes.
but were you aware, though, of what the Samoan community's response was, particularly those who maybe said, hey, why isn't he playing for us?
Well, I mean, thankfully, I did have that wonderful privilege of playing for the Samoan team against Wales in 1986. I nearly said 1886, so ancient. Wow. But in 1986, there was a one-off game between Wales and the Samoan team, and I had just made the Auckland team. I think I just played for New Zealand Colts.
And you were playing number 8 at that time.
Yes. And you know, there wasn't the Manu Samoa as we know it now. That name hadn't even been invented. It was just the national team of Samoa. And I got a call from George Meredith, the coach, and he asked, hey, can you Fats, and I think it was maybe another Tai Fong or one of the sort of Samoan boys who were doing quite well in New Zealand, can you guys come over and help bolster our team? It's the first time we're playing Wales. We've only ever played the Māoris, Tonga and Fiji. And it was a one-off. So I was on that plane as quickly as I could, because what a wonderful privilege to, to play for the motherland in that sense. So I did actually have that privilege, but then, you're right, Julian, when the World Cup came around and in '87 and that sort of opportunity arose where, hey, it was the first World Cup and, this Kiwi Samoan boy was in the mix and I knew that selection was sort of around the corner. I had to sort of decide, do I just, is this my pathway? And absolutely, it was really easy, because not only I dreamed it as a young kid, born and bred out west, and having that strong connection to this whenua and this community and this, in terms of Aotearoa and all my opportunities that had sort of built me and equipped me and raised me. I'm a byproduct of this community, particularly out west, and everything else that contributed to my development, not only as a rugby player but as a young man, a young Kiwi Samoan boy, and so that decision was actually easy, because the All Black dream was so powerful. But at the same time, the people in Samoa were saying, go for it. My whānau, my ainga, everyone was saying, oh, you've got to go for the All Blacks, because Samoan rugby was still pretty much in its infancy. It wasn't really till '91 when the late Peter Whatelofa and Sue Biji built that team that it became the manu. So I don't think there was any pressure, and I don't think in reflection that the Samoan people at any stage ever thought, oh, why is he playing for New Zealand? Quite the opposite. It was like, you go for it, boy. You've got our, we're going to tautoko you, we're going to kapoai and support you every way, because we love seeing in the same way that every Samoan loves seeing BG as a Samoan All Black, our people love it when our Samoan boys, reach the real pinnacle of rugby, in the sense that they're playing for, the greatest iconic team in the world. And people understood too my strong connection to Aotearoa, the fact that I was born here. I actually, my dad, my late father was, from the South Island. So I had all those strong connections to this whenua too. And so they got that. And so I've only always had wonderful support around that decision. And I've been able to give back to Samoan rugby at different stages over the last sort of 20, 30 years in coaching and in other ways of support. So it's still very dear to me. And particularly the plight of Pacific rugby too.
And you're still involved now in terms of your community, the Western Samoan community, and the work that you're doing now. I want to come to the resilience potentially you had to build up when facing criticism for your stance around not playing on Sundays. How much pressure was applied upon you to try and change your position on not playing for the All Blacks on Sundays?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a context. I was raised in a very strong Christian home. I mentioned my dear mum. You know, our family became that place out west where all the ainga came to during the 70s as part of that migration story, when, you know, a lot of Pacific Islanders were the doors opened wide so that our people could come and fill those semi-skilled jobs that no one else wanted to do in the manufacturing and the factories. There was the same out west. And so a lot of our uncles and aunties and cousins came to live with us. Also for schooling, of course, education was paramount. It's a big part of the driver in our communities, and in terms of coming to the land of the milk and honey, it was to get ahead. So our home was the central HQ for all these whānau and ainga coming from Samoa. And so I was raised in this home of 12 to 15 uncles, aunties and cousins, plus my mum. And I'm very grateful because I was raised in this very rich, nurturing home full of aroha, of alofa. And so, you know, I always speak to the truism that it does take a village to raise a child, and I'm a true byproduct of that. Yeah. And so I'm so grateful. Like, we didn't have much materialistically, but I was so rich in people and aroha. And so, but the big fundamental component of that home and my upbringing was our Christian faith. And so I had this very staunch, wonderful mum who always said, Sunday, the Lord's Day, we're going to go to church, we're going to have our kongai, people are going to come around, we're just going to, that's our life. And that's all I knew, you know, would go back to church in the evening, we'd probably have 3 services. But that was my life growing up. But then at some point, you know, I had to make my own decision, and I was about 16 or 17. I remember I sort of started to make some of the grades, and I was probably old enough to make my own decision. Up to then, you know, coaches would come knocking at our door and say, "Oh, Mrs. Jones, your boy's doing well. We need to take him to a trial for Auckland. We'll come to pick him up." And she said, "Oh, sorry, sir. My boy's not going anywhere. We're going to church, and we're going to, you know, we honour the Lord's Day." But there was a point where I had to, of course, make my own decision. And I just knew when that pressure, as you referred to, started to come, I just had even as a young 16, 17-year-old, I just knew, you know, I had a strong conviction. You know, my faith was important to me even at that young age. Yeah. I knew I wanted to honour my mum. That was an important part of my upbringing and my sense of why, you know, why I should continue to honour the Lord's Day and stay true to that. And so I had to make a decision then, and I was very clear in my mind. I had a real peace about that, but I could sense the pressure, you know, even the questioning, and even, you know, thankfully I don't think anyone came up to me and said, "Oh, you're what an idiot, you know, why don't you play on Sunday?" But I think as I got older, and particularly around 18, 19, and I still remember one of my early coaches, without naming him, one of the great coaches that sort of discovered me. You know, he probably knew that for me to become an All Black, I'd have to, you know, switch that or change that decision that I'd held on to, even as an 18, 19-year-old. I was getting a bit older then, and could probably foresee that I could probably make the All Blacks, but that was going to hold me back. So I asked the question after a game, you know, "Michael, I know you have a dream, and you're probably going to be good enough to get close to the All Blacks. The World Cup's around the corner. But I think to do that, you're going to have to really start playing on Sunday." And I just clearly remember I was in our rugby club, and I just looked them straight and I said, "I can't do that. That's not going to happen. It's who I am. I feel that I could never compromise that." And I'm so grateful looking back that, you know, I think, wow, where did that come from? You know, I was a pretty shy, reserved 18-year-old, 19-year-old, but I had enough, I suppose, unction and wherewithal and fortitude to just look my coach in the eye and say, "Sorry, coach, it ain't going to happen. That's who I am, and I'm going to stay true to it. And if it means I never play for the All Blacks, I'm prepared for that," even though it was a powerful dream. And thankfully, as my journey went through life, it came my way. And whilst I did miss some games and a couple of tests, and that was painful, always watching from the sideline, particularly playing in a semi-final of a World Cup, and I'm sitting in the sideline in the grandstand. You know, they're well, you know, only human. There's a lot of those moments where you question that, boy, this is hard.
Yeah.
But then deep down, you have this real conviction and this real sense of purpose and peace, I suppose. It's hard to explain.
I think I understand now, because when your book, The Iceman, came out in 1994, I think, and you were still relatively young at the time. Yes. You probably don't know this. In fact, you won't, because I was of no significance at all. But you went on a book signing tour, and you came to Wellington at a bookstore in Lambton Quay, and me and the rest of the loose forwards and the champion Pōneke Burnie under 20 B team went along, and I was an aspiring openside / bench warmer at the time. And
that's not what I heard, bro. I heard you're one of Te finest.
Oh yeah, you've certainly bought my narrative anyway. But we couldn't afford to buy the book, actually. But we turned up with a piece of paper, me and my figure number 8, and very kind of shy, and didn't want to say boo to you, and you were very ingratiating, which we appreciated. But you wrote and I've still got the paper. You wrote on my paper, you signed it, and the phrase you had on there was "never scare."
All right. Wow.
And I thought for years, what I thought you meant by the way that you play blindside and open side, that you meant never scare of opposition on a field. And I think I've only just clicked what you really meant about that. It's about courage of conviction. Yep. It's about having that source of strength to be able to lean on when you're battling with massive knee injury in 1989, when you're battling with World Cups and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Is that what you meant by that? Is that what you've lived life by, in terms of that kind of creed of always having the strength of conviction? Yeah,
I mean, never scare it's a little bit of a play on being a bit fresh, and that's who we are, never scare. And
talk me through that.
I mean, I know we used to use it a lot, the likes of Fats and some of the island boys, when they never scare, never scare. But it was more than that. You're absolutely right, Julian. There's a profoundness, a deepness to it. When you go out on the field, I mean, you just go hard. You give it your best. You're never scared. You don't take a back step. You're playing for the honour and the pride and everything that jersey represents. But it's also about, everything you do. Obviously, just stay true to who you are, what you believe, your sense of purpose, your identity, what makes you unique. Never compromising those fundamental core values, principles, aspects that's part of your DNA and who you are and how you've been shaped by your parents in particular, your village, your people. So, I'm so proud of you that you even remembered that, but we still use that. It's an interesting term, but we still use it. It's only 2 words, but it speaks to, I think, a lot of the mindset that we have we talk a lot about, what the inner core of what drives you, and that's a big important part of it. You've got to stand for the things that really matter in life. You've got to stand for, and you've got to fight for. So it's sort of a call to be courageous, to be brave, to be bold, and never compromise and stay true.
It is my humble opinion, and it's aligned with comments others have made. John Hart says you were the almost perfect player. Of course, he was a hard taskmaster, so I don't know why he said almost, but many people, I'm one of them, still believe you're the greatest open-side flanker in world rugby. There's another guy that people talk about, Matua Parkinson. No, Richard McCaw. People talk about, but of course, you were a supreme athlete. You changed the game. And then again, when you had your injury in '89, you changed the game again, adapted to become one of the world's best blindside flankers. And people still mention you in the greatest All Blacks 15 of all time. If I can, I guess, conclude this part around your rugby career, and I know it's been very brief, but in that knee injury, because a lot of people at the time said you would never come back from that, that it was a shocking injury. I think the nation cried, actually. It played on One News that night so many times, and I certainly did anyway. And many people thought you'd never come back from it in terms of a rugby player. What was your thinking process? What were you doing through that recovery period to keep driving you to get back on the field and wear the black jersey again? What was that well within that kept you going? Yeah,
I mean, that was, you have those times when you're in the valleys and you're in the mountaintops in life, but as a rugby player, that was probably one of the real dark valleys. Those moments where the dream, I'd been living it for 2 or 3 years and being part of that amazing All Black team and Auckland team, and I think we probably hadn't lost games as an All Black for a good 2 years, and it was an armchair ride playing with some of the real greats, and they were all playing at their prime. Joe Stanley, the Wetton brothers, JK, Buck Shelford, Grant Fox, Sean Fitzpatrick. I mean, Stephen McDowell.
Graham Henry is your Auckland coach. Thanks for that, by the way. As a Wellington fan, it wasn't much fun, I can tell you.
Got to forgive sometimes, but the shoes on the other foot now. I mean, we get beaten up more times by the Hurricanes and the beloved Wellington team, bro. But so I was just, things were just going unbelievably well for me, and I just couldn't believe the ride. I was living the dream. That dream came true. I had as a young kid to become, to play for the All Blacks and to be Brian Williams. And then a split second, obviously, it just got taken away. It was just the dream. Was just, crashed and smashed, so to speak, in a big lump on the field when that big Argentinian took me on the side and probably did the right thing diving for the ball. I was trying to kick the ball and score a spectacular try at Athletic Park, but I'll never forget that because the impact was so great, and I must admit I wanted to get up. I felt like crying, but I couldn't because there was 40,000 people and about 1 million people watching on TV. But all I remember was I knew it was bad. I mean, my leg was in the wrong place, and I remember getting carried off, and Doc was looking at it, Doc Mayhew, and he was able to move this part of my leg anywhere, which way really. So as it so happened, I'd ruptured every single ligament, and it was pretty well, smashed and pretty munted really, because it was described to me by Dr. Titchens the next day when he did the operation as more like being hit by a car going about 40k. Wow. So it was really serious, and it was funny. I remember waking up the next morning after the surgery. I got rushed up and reading the papers, and it was poor Michael Jones. What a shame, but thank you for the memories, So it was almost like the whole world, like you say, was starting to, like, wow, have I finished, have I? Because I think they realized how serious it was, and, even the people around, but not my family. And, it's interesting, at that point in my life, I was only 23, 24, sitting in that hospital bed and reading the papers and having the prognosis from the doc saying, hey, you pretty much ruptured all your ligaments. It was like being hit by a car going 40k, and I can't say you'll ever play again, but hey, and doctors are realistic, not going to get your hopes up too high. So that was sort of my lot, sitting there, and so, I was sort of faced with, a sort of what road do I go on now? Do I sort of accept what the world's saying and what the doctor's saying and what the papers are saying, and maybe, if I can sort of get back on and start play social rugby and get back and play all the other little, volleyball and touch rugby, then that would be a pretty good outcome. But I knew in my heart of hearts that even at that moment, and I remember my family being there, and my mum, they all pray for me because that's how we do it, and believing that I can have a miraculous recovery, and that's part of that sort of Christian faith, and I believe that too. But what I really realized was I was going to have to go down this really hard journey, and I was going to do everything it took to get that jersey back, and I was very determined at that moment, and at no point along that journey, and it took about, to cut a long story short, it took about 18 months to play my first sort of social game for my old school, and then after that I got selected for the Auckland C team the next week, and then the Auckland B team, the Auckland A team, and then I was back playing for the All Blacks in 1990 on the trip to France. But that journey, I have to say, again, it was the power of the love of the people around me, my mum, and the faith aspect was very important, and just the people who really matter, that village, they all came to my side, and they nurtured me, they loved me along that way, they picked me up when I was thinking I couldn't do this, and they'll rub the dust off my back and said, keep going, son, keep going, uso, keep going, bro, you can do this. And when I think back, it was, it was just really pressing into the things that really mattered most, my faith, my belief systems, and those people closest to me. But the beautiful part of that story is I got back after about probably the most difficult, demanding, challenging mental, physical battle I'd ever faced. It was 3 times harder than actual getting in the All Blacks, was trying to get back in after that injury. But I got there and played another 9 years on this knee. So I'm so grateful. I'm grateful that at that point in that crossroads in my young life, I didn't settle for second best. I didn't, want to go and go through life and then one have the if nots and the what if onlys type of scenarios. But I just determined really clearly in my heart and my mind and deep in my spirit that I was going to go for this again. I wanted it. I really felt that I was called for that. That was part of my life story, was to have that black jersey and be that in that position. And it's funny when I think back now, when I look back, I realize that the greatest gift that rugby gave me, and even being an All Black, was the platform. When I retired later in my life, I realized that this whole sort of life's journey and what it was really preparing me for and what it was all about was actually the platform that I was able to, that I've been able to use. But particularly as soon as I retired, I realized, hey, this rugby has given me this amazing platform, being an All Black. How do I steward that? How do I take that and use it to make a difference, a positive difference, particularly in the worlds that I move in, with our rangatahi, with our youth, and having, always stay close to my community and never getting disconnected. You always see the needs, the gaps, the areas where our people are, not just whānau, but particularly our rangatahi, they're falling through those cracks. How do I use this position of influence, this platform that rugby has been I'm so grateful, for that gift. So how do I now steward it and optimize the influence?
That's good, because I was going to get to the point about that as a platform to be able to propel you forward, thinking about what the ultimate outcome was post your rugby career for you, and what the ultimate outcome was in your role in achieving social outcomes for your community. And then the process around how you deal with challenges. You've got a master's degree, you've got a business degree, again, challenges in the university tertiary education system, and you've seen firsthand the impact that system has on our rangatahi, on our people, and the challenges that it presents them in their own kind of journeys and trying to follow their fields of endeavour. So a couple of things there. Let's start with that outcome about what you really wanted to achieve post your All Black career. You talked about rangatahi and community. What was the ultimate outcome you were striving for? What did you want to achieve in a certain time frame for you and for your community?
I realised really early, and that as soon as I'd retired, that firstly I had to look after my wife and kids. I mean, I played in that amateur era. We weren't financially, we didn't get the returns on that, but the gift that it gave us in terms of the experience was second to none. I'll never substitute those amateur years for anything. It was the best times of my rugby life, the joy of it.
It helped with your process, your thinking process and dealing with challenge.
But also it shaped me, I was a really shy, withdrawn, very reserved, quite sheltered young Polynesian Kiwi boy from out west. But rugby really did develop my, and grow me and build me and equip me, because you're out on limb, you're thrown into this big world and you've got to survive. And so I was grateful for that, but I also realised that, and I suppose it was part of my upbringing, and I saw it modelled firsthand in my mother and my whānau and my uncles and aunties was, we have a saying in the Samoan culture that ole ala, ole pule, ole tautua, the road to true leadership is through service. So everything was about serving, to serve each other, to serve our family, to serve our communities, to serve our church. It's all, to serve our Lord. Everything is around service, right? And so that's always been so fundamentally central and I suppose the very basis on which I've had my outlook on life, it's always been around, it's this this upside down model of actually to lead you serve, and then to serve as a byproduct you become a leader. You don't do it to become the leader, but you just do it because that's what you're called to do. So
I've heard you talk about this a lot, and that notion of servant leadership is very prevalent in Pacific cultures and Māori and Pacific Island communities. That servant leadership notion is it's an important facet of leadership. In fact, it is for many the model of leadership. Was that very prevalent to you at that time? That's
all I knew, to be honest, because like I said, it was modelled by my late mother. We have the Matais in our family. We saw how they ran our family. I think it's all about, you're there to serve every need as it comes up, or you serve those around you, but particularly where they're the most vulnerable. Particularly those who on the peripheries, and that was just something we did. That was something our family did. And
that's where your specific focus on rangatahi.
Yes,
West, but Auckland rangatahi. That's where your specific focus came from.
Yeah, it was obviously it's part of my DNA. I'm sure that's a generational thing. I mean, I think of even the stories of those who've gone before me in my whānau. It's always been that kaupapa. It's always been that tikanga, really, about we've just been a family that's just served, and so that was quite natural for me, I suppose, to just use my influence to continue that servant leadership model. And but then at the same time, it was because when I'm thinking about sort of the late 90s, early 2000s, when I finished my rugby, not only in education but in a whole lot of right across the segments of our communities, there was so many, as they still are, so many gaps and so many areas where our people in particular were getting left behind. So they still use it now, but there was often referred to as the long brown tail of under, I suppose, where social and economic statistics of our people, whether it's health, education, prison numbers.
I don't like that term.
I don't like that term, but it was, we always hear about the long brown tail, and that's Māori and Pacific underachievement, or, we're on the wrong side of the socio-economic statistics. So, very early on, and I know this has been very much what's driven, and I suppose a burden for many of our community leaders like yourself, all of us who have come from that generation, is, how in our lifetime do we shorten that long brown tail? If there's a tail, which the stats tell us there is, we see it every day. How do we in our lifetime be part of the solutions, or part of the initiatives, or part of the mahi to see that at least that long brown tail shortened, and ultimately to disappear? And in fact, we want to be the head and not the tail. And that's how we were raised, and that was fundamentally part of this mission, is okay, we want to see that, how do we as leaders, how do we as, I suppose, called and use our influence, how do we ensure that we can narrow that tail, see it disappear in our lifetime while we've got breath in our lungs and our hearts are still beating, but also ultimately we really actually want to be part of the head and not the tail, because that's that ika, the ia, the fish, we want to be that and not the tail. We want to be at the head. So that's always what's really driven me and pushed me. And
in all aspects, not only in your academic career. And
yes,
you're at the Office of Pacific Advancement, or AUT for a while, and I used to see you in that building there with Te Ara Poutama, but also in your own business career, right? You've been a bit of an entrepreneur, and you've undertaken a lot of business work as well. That's always been your focus.
Yeah, and the business has been more a means to an end. I mean, a lot of the mahi we do, we've got to make sure we're in a position where we can keep our families fed and put our daughters and sons to university, whatever it is, and just make sure that we can look after the home fires, and that's important. But ultimately, it's also that you can have a situation where you can give of your time, and a lot of that time is voluntary, to not just lead that mahi, but actually what we've found is you've actually got to initiate, you've got to dream it. You're probably the ones who are going to have the vision for it, but then you've got to build a team to ultimately see that operationalized and actioned out and outworked, because it's no use having, a vision or a dream without having the game plan and having, most importantly, the people or the team. So that's been something I've been really found that I've been really having to put a lot of my time and energy in. And then you might set up programs, you might set up trusts, non-for-profit initiatives, and then you start building these vakas or waka or vehicles of transformation empowerment. But you're really an important part of that team that firstly sees the horizons, obviously has to read the waves and the winds and the, put the sails and hold the rudder, but you build the waka as well, I suppose. Yeah. But that's sort of where I've found myself, and I realize, that's been a big part of what I've been called to do.
But that's not by fluke or by chance. I mean, one has to have skills, attributes, experience, capability to be able to do that. But they also have to have almost an aura about them, a charisma about them to inspire, to get others on board the waka that you're leading and navigating and building at the same time and all that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if you realise that that's something that you have, or even if you've known you've had it and used it as a tool to be able to get people on board the waka. Because, look, I remember when we were back at AUT and we used to have the Māori versus Pasifika sports days. I don't know if you noticed, but every time we were playing basketball, you had Alfie Schuster, which was a decided advantage for the Pasifika team. We had me, Jason King, and Valence, not a skilled athlete amongst us. But I don't know if you noticed, but every time you guys got the ball, we kind of stand out the way and go, oh, it's Michael Jones, and I can't play against Michael Jones. But there is an aura and a charisma about you that enables and inspires those people to get on the waka with you. I wonder if you know that you have that, and if you've known that you've used that in a good way, to get people on board the waka.
Julian, I think it's probably something I'm just starting to get comfortable with now, a bit later in my life, to be honest. Yeah, I can't say. In actual fact, I've whether I've underestimated that or it's something that sort of maybe growing a bit later in my sort of leadership journey. But I've always felt that firstly get your hands on the on the hoy, on the foy, and just paddle. But then, realizing too that people are looking at you to actually, you actually need to step up and even, that can be uncomfortable, because, we're always brought up really to be seen and not heard. You're in the, you're out the back with the tea towel at the marae. Then that's really where you build you do your time, and you do the hangi at the back. The road to the paipai is through the kitchen, right, or at the back, whatever, and with the tea towel in hand. So that's, you do that for. It's a really interesting question because, I've only just recently had to ask that a bit more, but I think you just do that, and then at some point you realize, well, yeah, actually everyone's starting to look at you, and you need to step up, and you need to sort of step into that leadership mantle. Or mandate, and sometimes for the most of us, we're like, ooh, it's a little bit scary, but it's also, I don't want to, step into that. That's just the way we're raised, But then there's a point where you realize, no, in actual fact, you are destined. This is your call. This is your purpose in life. You just got to own it. You've got to be comfortable in that skin, and you just got to step up and do it. So I realized more and more recently that I've just got to keep doing that. And I think a lot of it just happened, but now I've got to be a lot more intentional, because also mindful of the fact that time is of essence, and we've got to really fast track that shortening. We've got to really, build some real momentum a lot quicker.
Why?
We've got to get it quick.
Why is time of the essence?
Because we just don't see much changing. We don't see a lot of real change happening in there. And in actual fact, the things we've talked about 20 years ago, a lot of those things have intensified. So it's like, it's not to say that we haven't achieved things, but it's just that the forces around us are so powerful that it's not like you're in a sinking waka, but you've got to keep bailing out and keep paddling, because we know the horizons are there, and we've got good people, we've got great people. And the good thing is, and this is a big passion of ours, to do this, we've got to build the next generation of leaders, and quickly. We've got to see the next real dynamic, charismatic. We might have not seen ourselves as that, and if we're feeling that there is that mana that we've earned, because you only earn that mana, and that you might be now qualified to move in with that mana, then you've got to do it, step up and do it effectively, do it and optimize it. And optimizing is knowing to be skillful in how you navigate using that, and doing it in such a way that honor, respect, all those important values, humility, stay very fundamentally grounded in that, cope up in that.
How heavy is that mantle of leadership?
It's heavy. It is heavy because I think
because
it's exciting because we live in exciting times in the sense that I'm excited about the seeing the growth of the next leadership stepping up, and it's like anything when you build these, when you see it's about getting that sort of real traction, so the momentum, and so when you see them mobilizing and then you see the activation, and you're all navigating, and then you can get the advocacy and the championing, and things start to shift. I'm seeing that, so that's exciting. But I think the leadership mandate and mantle will always be heavier on any leader, and I think that's important because that's what keeps you driven, and that's what keeps you pushing through and persevering and never giving up, and really making sure that again, steward that gift so well, optimize this window of opportunity that you've got to be an influencer, to raise up a next generation of leadership, but to ultimately just, be part of where the change, being a change agent, and ensure that everything that you're about and everything that you can give, your energy, your time, your passion, your skill sets, your expertise is contributing to that shift, contributing to that lift, contributing to that shift and change and transformation.
Because we as a country are terrible with our leaders. We expect them to be the greatest All Black ever, to work for free, to not make money, to be impeachable. Actually, a lot of these things you've ticked off, but anyway, to be impeachable, good family men, accessible all the time, not make any mistakes, be incorruptible, all those things. And as well as that, to not be a tall poppy. We as a society in New Zealand have this tendency to place all these burdens upon our leaders, and when they stuff up, we come down on them like a ton of bricks. We don't give them any compliments at all. And then when they pass away, because of the mantle of leadership that they've had, which burns them out and they die years before they should have, then we show up at the tangi and do 3-hour speeches on how good they were. Have you struck that? Is that something that you've seen, felt, heard, particularly in your own respect as a leader? And is that something that gets in the way, or do you just try and plough through and keep going?
I mean, nothing we do is for the audience, of out there. I mean, it's driven by innate, desire and passion to just always do what's right. And so I think that sort of, it's all that clutter, it's sort of, you see through all that. It doesn't, does it add to the burden? It probably just, more than anything, makes you more determined to overcome and succeed and win this, because you don't do it for the pats on the backs or the honor or the glory or it's not about that, obviously, because but when you see the real change in our rangatahi, or you see for example, our school in Otahu doing great things about shifting mindsets and fulfilling God-given potential in these kids, well, that's that far supersedes and exceeds any, you can get a bit precious or a bit, a little bit sensitive to what, even what, even critics or even those who might try and undermine or take away, because there are those who, there is, particularly when you're moving in mainstream world and you're, I'm a true believer what's good for Māori and Pacific is good for Aotearoa, but there is a lot of forces and obstacles in that journey where, not everyone's on that same waka, not everyone's on that same waka.
So how do you deal with that?
I think it's important to challenge it. I'm learning to do that more as a leader, that I actually have to be a bit more of a champion and advocate for calling out stuff and maybe even, even standing up against, forces or intentions or anything that could undermine, I suppose our aspirations, both for tangata whenua and as Pasifika. And I think for Pasifika as leaders, and we tend to only work with those leaders who understand that is, although we have this wonderful tuakana tēnā relationship with tangata whenua, and we've done great mahi together, we are still connected to this land through a shared whakapapa, yes, but we are still, we are muri whenua. Mana whenua has its place, and we understand that. But how do we then hold on tightly to the korowai, so to speak, and see where that can take us on together. And so that's an important part of how we do leadership in this contemporary Aotearoa context. And I think without understanding that, whether it's in the way we lead or in the mahi we do, we won't get the honour and we won't get the cut through that we need to, unless we do it like that. I mean, to honour tangata whenua and the tiriti and everything that it means. If we don't get that and move with that and understand that, and sort of move really strategically with that, we're not gonna move. And we totally believe that for Pasifika to advance, to Pasifika to move forward, it's this wonderful relationship with tangata whenua, and my experience is that tangata whenua is always looking to bring us with Pasifika, with tangata whenua. In my experience, I've never had an experience where they've wanted us to stay there, because I think they also understand that for this future, it's the tuakana tēnā relationship is really important, and for all of us to move forward and fulfill our aspirations and our passion and desire for a better Aotearoa for all New Zealanders, mainstream, non-Pacific, non-Māori. It's about that very clear kaupapa, and so we operate that way all the time, and we're so privileged. And again, the only leaders I work with in our community are the ones that get that and operate that way too, and that's how we're seeing real momentum for us.
To come back to you specifically, I think you're a victim of your own success to a certain degree, because when you are the quote-unquote almost perfect rugby player, people expect you to be almost perfect at everything. For instance, you become the coach.
You're a bit biased, bro, because I'm sure we're related down the road. But even that comment on Richie McCaw,
I'll claim it.
Jeez, I don't know if I can go there. Sorry, bro. that comparison.
But you are a victim of your success because you were so good. For example, you become the coach of Manu Samoa. I think a lot of people thought, right, they're going to be the next best rugby team in the world. You've made some political comments as well in the past and tied yourself to political movements and face a bit of criticism there as well, right? And even in business, you're a successful business person in your own business life. And that came with some criticism as well. And that sense of, this is the almost perfect person, therefore we don't want you to do anything that we don't agree with, and therefore that foils the kind of perception that we have of you, is, again, another pressure that you've had to deal with, albeit in line with the work that you're doing in your community for rangatahi. And I wonder how you deal with that, because that happens. You, personally.
Well, the easy answer is obviously very far from perfect in every way, even as a rugby player, bro. And just talk to my wife about that and my kids,
I heard about a Christmas tree or something.
But again, it is part of the leadership challenge. You know, as a role model, like, you know, again, it's always something I've taken serious. You know, I've never been able to accept that someone says, well, I'm not a role model. You know, I might be a rugby player, superstar, blah, but I'm not a role model. I don't know if you can separate the fact that if you're got influence, if you got, you know, you're out there, then you've got influence. How can you not have, you know, you're either going to be a positive role model or a negative role model. You can choose, right? So, I mean, it's just been important to try and walk a road that's pretty straight and narrow in that regard, and it's not easy. But I think I've been privileged I've been grateful that I've had an upbringing that sort of given me, you know, obviously important values and principles and a way of life that obviously, you know, I again try not to compromise, ensuring that I'm, I suppose, living at a plumb line level that and it's never perfect, but I do hope that it can even encourage the next generation that we can, you know, walk through life, you know, honouring people, serving people, loving on people, inspiring people, if that's what you got to do. Obviously, influencing people. So to be the positive influencer, you've got to try and live a lifestyle that lines up with that. Because I think the biggest thing for Kiwis is, and it was the same when I made that decision. You know, one of the great things about not making that decision not to play on Sunday was the support and respect I got from my fellow players, my coaches. But I know that if I'd ever sort of messed up in that space, I would have been a hypocrite, and that's when all that good, I suppose, integrity and credibility I had sort of won with them would have been taken away in a moment in time, and one bad decision. So I've always had to, you know, try and make sure that wherever I can, I'm not undermining what I know is my ultimate calling, but also the integrity and credibility that then has a big part of shaping the influence. Yep. So if I had, to you know, to maybe come back to your question, Julian, you know, that it's not about trying to live a perfect life, because that's impossible, but it is about trying to live a life that has a certain plumb line that you've got to stay close to, and the moment you start dropping below that or underneath that line, it undermines a lot of things, and particularly your integrity and credibility and maybe your good name, which then undermines the level of influence you can have, and what you're trying to do, and in terms of being the most effective, and what you're ultimately trying to do.
So let's talk about the ultimate calling. What's the one change you want to affect next 5 to 10 years? What is the one change you want to see happen in the next 5 to 10 years as part of that ultimate calling?
The one change, obviously, you know, when I sort of do come back to, I've got a real heart for our nation. I'm a proud Kiwi Samoan boy, but I know if I can, and this is where I do tend to focus, if I can affect positive, real change in the socio-economic lot of Pasifika people, not just here in Auckland, but throughout this society, I do believe that that's going to has to have a positive outcome for society in general. We're the youngest people group in New Zealand, so Pacific youth, you know, 45% of our people are under the age of 18 or 18. So, you know, we've got this big group of kids growing up at the 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 9 to 13. They're in this part of the pyramid, and so the age pyramid. So that's going to be a bigger part of what this country looks like in the future. And again, if I suppose I'm coming back to that brown tail, bro. if that part of the brown tail is not, you know, is not successful, it's not moving up and forward and out,
that affects all of us.
Then ultimately affects all of us. You know, that's where our future leaders are going to come from too, of this country, as well as out of Māoridom. Yeah. So between, you know, those brown faces, that's increasingly what our nation's going to look like in the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. So I think for me is I'll come back to that brown tail, because if we're in all those socio-economic, statistics and I suppose our lot in society, unless that's improving, unless we're moving up, and unless we're getting lifted, and we're starting to, our true aspirations that our forefathers who came, in the 60s and 70s for a better future for their kids, for the next generations, for that dream to come true. That's really what, that even the next 5-10, I've got to believe that can happen in the next 5-10 years, because, again, the need for change is critical, and I truly believe that it has to be fast-tracked. There's a sense of urgency, and that's what gets me up every day, and that's what makes me push through the challenges, and I suppose to keep on keeping on in this leadership journey mandate that I've been called on.
Look, before we conclude, I have a couple of pages of paper from Evan Lee for your son. I'm happy to do that deal now. To come to the Hurricanes next year.
I like that. Oh, he's a good man. That's good. I like that.
Because the other thing is that, and this is true, if he does come to the Hurricanes, he'll be playing with apparently the next Michael Jones, which is Adi Savia. I don't know if you're aware.
Wow. No, Adi Savia is Adi Savia. I'd love my son to become the next Adi Savia. There's only one Adi Savia, but I mean...
I was being serious about the contract too, by the way. If you're open, I'm sure you're his manager. That's what I heard.
Yeah, well, he's still young. My son is still young, and he's had a bit of a tough season this year with a fractured foot, and he's been out, but he's back now with the sevens. But he's on his road to recovery. But a bit of adversity, is not a bad thing for a young boy. And again, that time in the valley is where character is forged, and the real inner core of a person is shaped. And I think whilst we don't like it, and even for my son, I wouldn't wish that upon him, but my hope is that, going through a bit of a early sort of valley in his burgeoning rugby career, and in his dream to be an Adi Savia, because that's his dream. He loves Adi, in the same way that I love Adi.
I can write that in the contract for him.
Yeah, so you're probably right. He probably will want to come down there.
But because you mentioned your wife, and I don't know how we're doing for time, but anyway, we'll keep going. They'll tell me to stop when they're ready. But because you said it's obvious your wife is the boss. she's the chief. She's the rangatira.
Well, I was saying in Māori and Pacific, we might think we're the head, but the neck.
Yeah, that's true.
Turns everything.
That's true. And you've got 3 kids. I wonder what's it been like for them having one of the greatest All Blacks in history as a father. God, they must be over it every time a World Cup comes around and everyone chases you for a comment and stops you for an autograph on the side of the road.
I think our lifestyle, we really, it's not a big part of how we do life anyway. And I think they pick. I don't even know if my son, my 9-year-old Levi, gets told at school, maybe if someone's watched something on. But he doesn't really register. I think for us, we probably have protected them, and saying that they've got really good heads on them, and particularly, my older kids, in that they just see me as their dad, obviously. And but it's, we don't have much in their house that reminds them of that, even though I was an All Black. So we try and sounds
like I've got more in my house than you at yours. It's only people with no lives like me, Taha, that accost you in the street and chase you up and all that.
Not at all, bro. Anytime, I love, and it's something that I've always been grateful of Kiwis are. I know that we love our All Blacks, and the love and support I've had has been a big part of the why too, because of there's always been such a wonderful respect too, and so for me, part of stewarding that gift is that the gift that I can give back to, whether it's the young boy from Poniki who came up and WAG school that day to get their paper signed, and I could sign Never Scare. For me, that's what it's all about, and it's made it worth it. And if I am remembered as a leader, or even as an All Black that just had a real heart for the people, I think then I've succeeded as an All Black. And it's interesting when I look at these. That's anyway part of who we are anyway, our legacy and the heritage of the All Black jersey. And And when I see that really personified and lived out with this new group of All Blacks, the humility, the respect, the love for each other, the love for the people around them. And I just think, just coming back to the success of the All Blacks, I just think that's been the fundamental point of difference. That's seen us being so, the most successful rugby sporting organisation in the world, and it's 125 years old, but what a legacy, and nothing's changed from those men who wore the jersey, and even now our wahine tour who were in that black jersey.
Right.
It's a legacy that continues, and I think that's a very powerful, I suppose, reflection or a powerful picture of leadership, of true leadership.
I can only wish you all the best, not just for us, i.e. Māori and Pacific communities, and not just for West Auckland either, by the way, but for the whole country. I do wish you all the best. And may you go with the grace of God in whatever you do.
Thank you.
Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapau. Pauna me te moana kei tere te karohirohi. E tā, tēnā rawa atu.
Kia ora, Julian. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Pawhitai te lava.
Tēnā.